Good morning and welcome to the daily cyber briefing for, yes, it's Thursday the 7th of August. Oh my goodness. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Right, nothing of great excitement going on at the moment, other than there is yet another Microsoft Exchange server vulnerability that allows unauthorized admin privilege escalation. This particular vulnerability is targeting hybrid Exchange environments where there's a mixture of on-prem and cloud-based Exchange components. The vulnerability is tracked as CVE 2025-53786, and it was announced yesterday. The flaw allows threat actors who've already obtained administrative access to an on-prem Exchange server to escalate their privileges by exploiting vulnerable hybrid joined configurations. Gets a CVSS score of 8 out of 10, which Microsoft says is important in severity, and I would generally agree with that. The recommendations are, if you are running an on-prem copy of Exchange, you should by now have applied the latest hotfixes. Specifically, the April 2025 Exchange server hotfix addresses the issue for Exchange servers, on-prem Exchange servers, and you need to make sure you're following Microsoft's instructions for deploying Exchange hybrid applications. So it's a mix of make sure you're patched and up to date, plus make sure that you are following good practice in your configurations for your hybrid components. CISA has also recommended that organizations disconnect public-facing versions of Exchange Server or SharePoint that have reached their end of life. Yeah, that's very solid advice. It is advice in the category of no shit Sherlock. So absolutely, I would strongly recommend that. Again, there should be somewhere in your corporate policies some or other statement along the lines of thou shalt not run hardware or software which no longer receives security patches. Running out of date stuff is dangerous if you have to, because there are environments where it's very difficult to keep things up to date. Make sure you have very specific dispensations and a review mechanism to make sure that any mitigating controls that you put in place around the devices or the systems with a dispensation actually work and are regularly reviewed to make sure they don't need to be updated or changed. So if you're running Exchange server, watch out. There's yet another vulnerability that's just kicked off. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about today, I came across an article in Hacker News which talks about fake VPN and spam blocker. Span? No. Fake VPN and spam blockers are tied to a group called VexTrio and are used in ad fraud and subscription scams. Now, specifically, this ad fraud and subscription scam is nothing more than same old, same old. However, it triggered me to think about the fact that we haven't spoken about the unintended but easily predictable consequences of the Online Security Act in the UK, or what should be probably better called the Online Let's Put Our Children in Danger Act. Right, there are many things which that act does, and there's a lot of talk at the moment around impact to freedom of speech. Personal opinion is that the current government doesn't give a flying doodah about freedom of speech. I think it's toys with the words, but depending on the political expediency, is quite happy to stomp all over rights of citizens. So, not unduly surprised that we got into a problem with freedom of speech. I don't really think that this government is likely to do anything about that because it doesn't really care. The other side of it, though, which it really should care about, is the fact that age verification checks for huge swathes of stuff creates all sorts of problems from the get go, and stores up a whole load of problems for people using the internet legitimately in the future. So, I mean, it's almost, where the hell do we begin? Let's start out with, let's accept that we're going to do this. All right. This now means that in order to access all sorts of things, you need to have provided that service provider with proof of age, prove you are not a child. Okay. And hands up who thinks that that information is going to be securely collected, processed, and stored, or deleted. I'm not seeing many hands. We know that anything collected by the government is an absolute disaster. They are utterly incapable of running IT projects. Anything collected by private organisations is as secure as the exec committee wants it to be. If they want to invest in top-notch security, they can. They mostly want to get on and do whatever it is that's making them money, and securely collecting data on behalf of a government is not making them money. They're not being paid to do this stuff. It's just a cost. So there will be a lot of pressure in a lot of organizations to do the minimum that they can get away with. So look out for a whole load more data breaches. Now, a lot of data breach stuff, it's kind of like, well, we're, as a society, we're learning to live with it. But some things, it becomes much more problematic when they're leaked. So things like usernames and passwords, giving people access to things, data out, what emails you've sent, whatever it may be. A lot of that stuff you can kind of just you can live with it, or you can work around mitigate the risks one way or another. However, if you lose control of government ID, that becomes a much more significant problem. That allows for a level of financial fraud against you, which isn't possible just by having access to your emails, or having got into somebody's Twitter account or whatever it might be. It's not easy to do things like get a passport reissued. How does the rest of the world know that the copy that they're being sent as proof of identity has been made null and void? There's no database you can go to that says, let me just check this passport number and see whether this particular passport has been nobody does it. Even if there is, I'm not aware of there being a database, but even if there is one, nobody's doing it. Same for driving licenses, same for all sorts of things that prove who you are. So age proving age by government ID, which seems to be kicking around quite a lot at the moment, is a particular problem. It's also just a utterly dumb idea to start tracking people at that level. So we've got all sorts of data problems, which could lead to all sorts of real world problems associated with this sort of mass ID check that's going on. And in the meantime, I personally don't believe that any of this is going to have the slightest impact on young people, young adults, children accessing things that this act is supposed to be stopping them from accessing. I mean, firstly, clearly, let's be blunt about it. The government has massively underestimated the determination of your average teenage boy to access pornography. And it doesn't take much to work out how to get around most of these checks. The checks are only relevant to organisations delivering services into the UK. So those organisations need to believe that the person trying to access the service is in the UK, right? So every fucking 12-year-old knows that you can get around controls by using VPNs. By the time kids are going to secondary school, they've worked out that they can get round the school's internet proxy controls, the internet access controls, by tunneling through with a VPN. And they're all doing it. I mean, literally, that any time they want to get to something that's blocked, they just do it through a VPN. And they have been doing for 10, 15, 20, no, at least 15, 10, 15 years. Now, the biggest problem that we're coming across now is that, okay, all kids know how to do that. Most kids can't afford or don't want to spend on a commercial secure VPN service. So forcing age restriction verifications on things is forcing kids to do things that, or is strongly encouraging kids to do things that we would consider to be risky behaviour. So they're going to start using free VPNs. Well, I mean, we're well aware of the fact that a large proportion of free VPNs are, at the good end of the scale. They're actually just collecting your data and selling it on because, they're making money out of it. At the other end of the scale, as per the article in Hack and Use, VPN services are being used to distribute malware. So we are putting children in danger by making it difficult for them to access things that they're going to access anyway in this particular way. It is, what can we do? Well, there is now talk about, well, perhaps the government will ban the use of VPNs in the UK, which is a ridiculously draconian idea. Along the lines of the government mandating that all people in the UK must leave their front doors open at all times, because what? I don't know, but it's like removing. We know that online stuff. It's a shitty world, frankly. Online, there's a lot of good things out there. But the bad stuff far outweighs the good stuff, to be completely honest. And it will come and get you if you let it. And the fact that we put in place lots of security is because we know that the bad stuff will come and get you. The bad people out there are going to come and get you. The easier it is to do it, the more they're going to do it. So we're absolutely ending up in the wrong place. Now, I'm not in any way arguing that we shouldn't have some kind of controls over age controls, over access to information on the internet. This, however, is very, very far from being where we should be. So, takeaway message: if you are somebody who I don't think anybody listening to this is going to come into the category of child accessing dodgy shit on the internet. If you are, though, don't use free VPNs. Don't make sure that the VPNs that you are using are actually legitimate. Check the in the T's and C's about the VPN providers policies on collecting, storing, and selling on log information about what you do, and check that um, they are they are registered in a jurisdiction which has reasonable privacy protections, not a jurisdiction where government or law enforcement can just march up and stomp all over what you think are your rights to privacy. Um, and as for the rest of us, well, I mean, obviously there's education to be done at a family level, but there's also, I think, we need to raise the awareness of the fact that the consequence of some of these decisions being taken by our illustrious leaders is quite possibly putting us in danger of all sorts of things. Banning encryption. Look, 20 odd years ago in France, I don't know what it's like now, but 20 odd years ago in France, there were massive restrictions on encryption. I remember having to get special licenses from Cisco in order to deploy certain sorts of firewalls and other bits and pieces in France, because quite frankly the French Secret Service needed to be able to decrypt stuff. I think they realized that was a really bad idea, and I think they've done some stuff about it. Let's get the debate kicked off, at least have something to think about in this space, because where we are at the moment, we are marching into a world that is making all of us less secure without actually doing anything. In fact, not only is it not doing something to protect the people it's supposed to be protecting, it's actually putting them in more danger than they would have been if this act had done nothing. Right, that's my rant for the week over, or for the day. No, there's another day in this week, isn't there? Never mind.